Everyone said he was beyond hope. No one wanted to go near him. At the local rescue shelter in rural Vermont, there was a German shepherd named Shadow who had become a warning sign more than a resident. Volunteers whispered about him in hushed voices. Staff posted notes on his kennel, "Do not approach." Even the most seasoned handlers refused to step too close. Shadow didn't bark for attention or wag his tail like the others. He growled, he lunged, he bared his teeth at anyone who came near, especially men. His cage had become his fortress, a place of snarls and silence. 8 months had passed since he was brought in, found chained to a fence at an abandoned farm, his ribs visible, his eyes dark and hollow. Most believed he had been trained as a guard dog by someone cruel, perhaps even used for intimidation. No one really knew what he'd been through, only that he hated people and didn't want to be saved. He was considered unadoptable until one quiet morning when Dr. Rachel Moore walked through the shelter doors with her 10-year-old daughter Leia at her side. Rachel wasn't looking for a pet. She was a trauma therapist specializing in behavioral recovery, but when she passed Shadow's kennel and their eyes met, something shifted. Not in the dog in her. Rachel didn't approach the kennel right away. She stopped a few feet back, gently, placing her hand on Hila's shoulder as they both looked in. Shadow was curled in the farthest corner, his massive frame folded tight like he was trying to disappear. His coat was patchy dull and his body rigid, but his eyes, they were wide open, locked onto Rachel with a strange, guarded intensity. Not rage, not even threat, just fear. "What happened to him?" Rachel asked, keeping her voice low. The shelter manager, a kind but cautious woman named Trish, sighed. "He was found on a deserted farm, chained. No food, no shelter. He's never bitten anyone, but he's come close, especially with men." As if on cue, a male volunteer walked by a few feet away, and Shadow sprang to his feet with a guttural snarl, hurling himself at the bars. Trish flinched. The volunteer muttered under his breath and quickened his pace. "We've tried behaviorists' meds, everything," Trish added. "He doesn't let anyone in." But Rachel saw something in that moment, not just aggression, but survival. A dog who'd learned that people were danger, a dog who had built walls so high even kindness couldn't get through. "May I sit here?" she asked, motioning to the floor in front of the kennel. Trish hesitated, then nodded. "He won't come near you." "That's okay," Rachel replied. "I'm not here to ask anything of him." She sat cross-legged, pulled a book from her bag. As Rachel settled on the floor, Leia crouched beside her for a moment, eyes wide with curiosity. "She's always loved animals," Rachel whispered to Trish, smiling gently, "especially dogs." Leela leaned closer to the kennel, keeping her distance but utterly focused. "He's not angry?" she said softly. More to herself than anyone else. "He's scared. I think he's just trying to protect himself." Trish raised an eyebrow. "Smart kid, she gets it from her mom." Rachel chuckled, brushing a hand through Leia's curls. "She wants to study animal behavior. One day, said she came today, not just to help, but to understand." Rachel began reading softly, not to Shadow, but simply with him. 2 days after their first visit, Rachel found Leia sitting on the back porch, her sketch pad resting on her knees. She had drawn Shadow again this time, not growling, but curled beneath a tree. Eyes half closed, peaceful. "I think he could be different," Leia said softly, not looking up. If someone just gave him a real chance. Rachel sat beside her, brushing wind-blown curls from her daughter's face. "Sweetheart, that kind of healing takes a long time and it's not easy." "I know," Leia said, glancing up. "But you always tell your clients the hard things are the ones worth doing. Maybe he's waiting for someone like us." Those words stayed with Rachel long after Leia went to bed. That night, she reviewed Shadow's case files again, but this time not as a therapist, assessing risk, but as a mother, hearing her daughter's quiet conviction. The next morning, she submitted the adoption application. At the shelter board meeting, the reaction was immediate. "He's dangerous," said Dr. Morgan, the shelter's head vet. "Unpredictable. We've seen no consistent improvement. He belongs in a facility, not a family. Home, especially one with a child." Rachel kept her voice calm. "He's not aggressive by nature. He's afraid his behavior is rooted in trauma. not dominance. What he needs is trust, routine, and a safe environment. Another board member interjected, "You're a single parent. What makes you think you're equipped for something like this?" Rachel looked directly at them. "I work from home. I have experience with trauma recovery. And Laya, she's not a typical 10-year-old. She's careful, she listens, and she's the one who suggested we bring Shadow home in the first place." Trish, who had observed Rachel and Wyler's visit, finally spoke. "She's right. That girl sat outside Shadow's kennel and didn't flinch." She noticed what most adults missed. Shadow didn't growl at her. That's rare. That means something. After a tense debate, the board voted. It was close, 4-3. In the end, Rachel's application was approved under strict conditions: weekly progress updates, regular sessions with a behaviorist, and an immediate return if any incident occurred. As Rachel signed the paperwork, she caught Laya's eye through the shelter window. The little girl gave a small, hopeful smile, the kind that said, "I knew you'd see what I saw." Getting Shadow home was the first real test. He refused to enter the crate, backing away with low growls the moment anyone got close. Rachel didn't force him. With the help of Trish, they created a temporary partition in the back of Rachel's SUV, giving Shadow a space he could enter on his own terms. After nearly 30 minutes of waiting, coaxing, and pure patience, he climbed in. Laya had come along for the pickup, sitting quietly on the curb while the adults worked. She didn't speak, just watched Shadow with steady, thoughtful eyes. As the dog finally stepped into the vehicle, their eyes met through the car window. Laya's small hand pressed gently to the glass, not to wave, but to connect silently, sending him a promise. "We're going to help you heal." The ride home was tense. Shadow panted heavily, his body coiled tight like a spring. Laya sat beside Rachel in the front seat, holding her sketch pad. Today's drawing was different. It showed Shadow not alone, but lying beneath a tree, while a girl sat quietly beside him, reading a book. When they arrived at their little farmhouse, the sun was already low. Rachel exited, first leaving the doors open so Shadow could see her. She laid a training lead on the ground and stepped far back. No pressure. Shadow stayed frozen, then stepped out slowly, nose low, tail down. He followed the lead inside, keeping distance. Inside, his space was ready. A crate without a door, soft bedding, no sharp sounds or fragile objects. Everything arranged for safety and healing. Laya peeked around the hallway, eyes full of hope. "Is this his forever spot?" Rachel nodded. "If he wants it to be." Shadow stood still, watching them both. He hadn't barked, he hadn't growled, but he had come inside, and Leela truly believed that maybe, just maybe, he was ready to begin again. Progress came in whispers, not shouts. During the first week, Shadow wouldn't eat unless Rachel and Laya left the room. He barely moved from his spot, flinching at every new sound, every sudden shift of light. But he no longer growled, and he never once tried to flee. Each morning, Laya would quietly place a fresh bowl of food near his crate, then leave a small drawing beside it. A sun, a heart, a dog with wide eyes. "So he knows he's not alone," she told Rachel, with quiet determination. One afternoon, Laya asked, "Why does he stare at me but not come close?" Rachel sat beside her on the floor. "That's not anger, Laya, that's caution. He's watching to see if we're safe. His world used to be full of danger. He's learning slowly that we're different." "But I love him," Laya whispered. "I know, and loving him means moving at his pace, not ours," Rachel said gently. "Watch his ears, his tail, how he shifts his weight. These are his words. He's telling us when he's scared or when he's curious." Leela nodded seriously, absorbing every word. By week 2, Shadow began eating while they were still in the room, as long as they kept their distance. He slept more deeply, no longer resting, with one eye half open. The tight coil of anxiety that once ruled him began to ease. Then came the night that changed everything. Rachel had just finished reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Laya was upstairs doing homework. Shadow suddenly stood, and began to pace. Wide, anxious circles across the living room. Rachel recognized the signs: restlessness, discomfort, fear of need. When he moved toward the back door, Rachel rose slowly and reached for the handle. Shadow lunged. The growl was deep, sharp, his body tense, mouth open. Rachel froze, but he didn't bite. Instead, he rushed past her and out into the yard, circling once before squatting. And she understood he hadn't known how to ask. Her sudden movement scared him, but he hadn't attacked. He'd chosen control. That night, Laya helped hang a little bell on a ribbon by the door. "We'll teach him how to ask," she said. Rachel smiled, hand-brushing her daughter's shoulder. "And we'll teach you how to listen." It happened late on a Saturday afternoon. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Laya sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, humming as she colored in a picture of Shadow under a snowy tree. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. A delivery truck pulled into their long gravel driveway. Before either of them could react, there was a loud knock at the front door, then the rattle of the handle. Shadow launched from his corner like a bullet. He didn't bark at first, just moved fast, direct, and for the first time not away from danger but toward it. He planted himself between Rachel and the front door, body rigid, head low, hackles raised. Then the growl came, deep, guttural, protective, the kind of growl that sent chills down your spine. Rachel instinctively placed a hand on Isla's shoulder, gently guiding her behind her. She didn't reach, for Shadow didn't speak his name. Instead, she spoke toward the door. "Please leave the package on the porch," she called out evenly. "We'll get it later." Through the window, she saw the startled delivery man set the box down and retreat quickly. Shadow remained in position, unmoving, watching the door even after the truck drove away. Only when the wind had settled and the silence returned did Shadow slowly lower his body ears, still alert, chest still rising fast. "Thank you," Rachel said softly, not daring to touch him. "You were protecting us, weren't you?" Isla stepped forward, slowly, kneeling a safe distance away. "He didn't just get scared," she whispered. "He stood his ground." Rachel met her eyes. "That's trust, Laya. Not perfect yet, but it's beginning." Shadow didn't return to his corner that night. Instead, he lay by the front door, the quiet guardian who had finally decided they were his to protect. By mid-winter, a quiet rhythm had settled into their home. Each morning, Rachel and Laya moved gently around Shadow's world, not in control of it, but part of it. Laya read to him from her favorite animal stories, sitting at a respectful distance. Rachel guided her in understanding his signals. A lowered tail meant anxiety, a soft blink meant trust. Mealtimes were slow, calm rituals with Laya, gently placing the bowl closer each day. Progress was measured in inches, not miles, but healing was happening slowly. Surely one snowy morning, Laya stayed home, nursing a cold, bundled in blankets by the fireplace. Rachel took Shadow for their usual trail walk alone. The snow was fresh, blanketing the woods in quiet white. Rachel let Shadow off leash. Just a few minutes. He had earned that freedom. Then something shifted. Shadow stopped ears, perked nose in the air. A second later, he bolted into the trees. "Shadow!" Rachel called out, heart racing. She followed, crashing through underbrush, her boots sinking in snow. She found him standing over a figure half buried in white. It was a young man, probably in his 20s, barely conscious, shivering uncontrollably. His hiking boots were soaked, his leg twisted at a sickening angle. A backpack lay nearby, half covered in snow. He must have fallen, been there for hours. Rachel knelt quickly, weak pulse, shallow breaths. Shadow didn't retreat or bark. He stayed beside the mantail, stiff but not tucked occasionally, nudging the man's arm with his nose as if checking on him. Rachel called 911, gave their location. "He's not responsive. Early hypothermia, possible leg fracture." As they waited, Rachel wrapped her coat over the man and leaned close to Shadow. "You didn't run from him," she whispered. "You stayed." When the rescue team, all men, arrived, Shadow tensed. His body stiffened, but he didn't lunge. No, snarling, just a low growl, quickly silenced by Rachel's calm presence beside him. "It's okay," she told him. "They're here to help." Shadow stood firm by her side, breathing hard but steady. That night back home, Leia listened in awe as Rachel described what had happened. She looked down at her drawing a sketch of Shadow, standing tall beside a fallen hiker, and smiled. "Mum," she said softly, "he didn't just change, he chose to." The snowstorm hit just days after the rescue power lines went down across the valley. The house grew colder with each passing hour. Rachel lit a fire in the living room, while Leia helped gather blankets and cushions, building a nest near the fireplace. Shadow paced nervously, at first unsettled by the flickering light and the change in routine. "We'll be okay, buddy," Rachel said softly. "It's just one cold night." Layla set down her sketchpad nearby, a new drawing of the three of them huddled near the fire. "He can sleep close to us," she whispered, "if he wants to." Shadow didn't approach at first. He settled in his usual spot, just out of reach, just within sight. But sometime around 3 a.m., Rachel stirred from half-leap to find Shadow had moved. He now lay curled beside Leia, not touching, but near enough for warmth to pass between them. Rachel didn't say a word. She didn't reach out. She simply added another log to the fire and whispered, "Good night, brave boy." When morning came, the house was still cold, but something inside it had changed. Shadow no longer slept in the far corner. That day he followed Rachel from room to room, still cautious but close. He brushed past her leg in the hallway, paused longer beside Leia's chair. That night, as Rachel worked at her desk, Shadow approached. He sat beside her quietly, then leaned just slightly until his head rested gently against her knee. Rachel froze. Then slowly she moved her hand just an inch, not forcing, not leading, and rested it atop his head. Shadow stayed, and in that moment the distance between fear and trust disappeared. Spring came with a letter. The shelter board officially ended their monitoring period based on the remarkable progress observed. It read, "We consider Shadow's rehabilitation a success, one that will inform our future work." Attached was an invitation. Would Rachel and Shadow return to the shelter to speak with prospective adopters? Rachel agreed, and this time Leia came too, holding Shadow's leash confidently. As they walked through the familiar gates, the staff froze. They remembered the snarling, unapproachable creature who had once shaken in the corner of his kennel. Now Shadow moved calmly beside the girl he trusted most. "I can't believe that's the same dog," one volunteer whispered. Inside the education room, a dozen people sat in a semicircle, some hoping to adopt, others simply curious. Rachel stood at the front, Shadow resting at her feet, head near Wyler's hand. "I'm not a dog trainer," she began. "I'm a trauma therapist, and what I've learned from working with people, I applied to Shadow." She explained her method. No force, no dominance, no quick fixes. Shadow didn't need to be controlled. He needed to feel safe. He needed to choose connection, not be forced into it. She paused, then looked at Shadow, who now lay calmly breathing, slow and steady. His aggression wasn't the problem. It was his solution, his armor. Our job wasn't to break it. It was to give him reasons to lower it. Leia raised her hand, shilly. "I used to think dogs just needed love," she said, "but they need understanding too." Shadow didn't change because we made him. He changed because we waited. A young couple in the back exchanged glances, then asked about a scared shepherd mix they'd seen in the kennels. "Do you think he has hope too?" Rachel smiled. "Every dog has a story, and if you're willing to listen, really listen, healing is always possible." Later that evening back home, Rachel sat by the fireplace as Leia rested her head on her lap. Shadow lay nearby, one paw stretched toward the warm light, his chest rising and falling in steady peace. On the wall above them hung a timeline, photos documenting every inch of progress. The first time Shadow walked into the house, the night he rang the bell to go outside, the moment he leaned his head into Rachel's hand and tucked between the photos, was something new, a certificate printed on simple white paper, Leia Moore, Junior Animal Companion and Care Volunteer. It was from the shelter, recognizing her role in helping Shadow's transformation. Rachel had tears in her eyes when she first saw it. Laia had received it quietly. "Shilly, it's not a big deal," she had said, but Rachel knew it was. It meant Laia had found her beginning her path. "You helped him heal," Rachel whispered now, brushing Wyler's hair back, not just with love but with patience, with understanding. Ella smiled, looking down at her newest drawing, the three of them sitting under a blooming apple tree. "This one's for spring." In a world so quick to judge Shadow had become a reminder that aggression is not evil, that fear is not weakness, that healing is possible not through force but through presence. Rachel looked down at Shadow, who was now watching the fire, relaxed and safe. "You didn't need to be fixed," she whispered. "You just needed to be seen." And for Leela, the journey was just beginning. Shadow wasn't her first rescued soul, but maybe, just maybe, he had shown her who she was meant to.